is Carol and Katie, and we find his wife. And when he passed away a few years ago, our family took over the ownership, me and my 4 children. So I just want to welcome you in his spirit because he loved this place so much. And I'm sure you would be happy to see what you all are doing and the poets, the wonderful people that are coming here doing readings. But I have to make a shout out for James and wonderful manager, I must say. And there's been a volunteer named Fiona. She's not here tonight. She'll probably come in later when she may be help. But she's just given so much help to him. He couldn't run this store alone, and James has done that probably. So anyway, and I want to welcome the folks that are here on Zoom, because there are several people here on Zoom, many people here. So enjoy yourselves. It's going to be a great reading. And thanks for coming.
Thank you. Oh, I guess I'll stand.
You can if you want to. It's up to you.
Good evening, everybody. Welcome. We have 3 great poets reading tonight. We have Julia Story, Mark Vincenz, and Elizabeth T. Gray Jr. And here's what introduction I actually wrote for Julia when she gave a reading in the Lit Bomb series a couple of months ago. I loved her second and first book so much, I wrote about Julia Story's new book, Spinster for Hire, for On the Seawall. Here's my lead. Since her first book, Post Moxie, is really an underground classic, a 3D movie of a book, news of a new Julia Story book is big news for me. Who could forget that pared-down, teenaged world of ugly camouflage pants and invasive bamboo, her dubious mysticism, the formal innovation of her text box prose poetry shorts, or how she resisted the hostility of Indiana towards girls. Spinster for Hire is her second full-length collection, a sort of sequel that shows her originality and extends her range into deeper wit and shadows, childhood, and being an adult. Formally, Spinster for Hire rises to the Post Moxie goad to do something new, especially with a number of 3-part narrative poems that offer scenes from distinctly different but thematically linked narrative moments. Narrative odes, they are. So there's Julie for you, in some ways, writing about Indiana, a formally inventive poet, but not in a flashy way, but in a way to serve the ends of her poems and end with their shocks of recognition. Julia's poetry is the best example of almost under-the-radar excellence that I know. Under the radar because we are too dazzled by the ability of a few presses to get our attention. Why not be free the way Julia writes to be free of Indiana and toxic fundamentalism and bleakness she will not only name, but laugh about? I don't mean that everybody is a dope or anything like that. Dan Chasen chose Julie's first book for the Morton Prize, and one of her poems in Spinster for Hire won a Pushcart Prize, and she had a poem in the New Yorker. Julie is one of my good Somerville poet friends. I'm not biased, I'm in good company, she's the real thing. Thank you for being here, Julia.
It's okay if I sit down.
Oh, yeah.
And I just got my negative COVID test back from color.com, because I work at Harvard, so and thank you so much, David, for that intro. David gave the best introduction. This was really sweet. So I'm just going to read poems from Spinster for Hire. Should I be like looking anywhere?
So you kind of look at the camera.
And yeah, this is my first live or in-person to me every time I come to give you the definition of this thing I carry with me, which in so many ways has gone beyond pain. A burning hand that takes me to sometimes even a trail of beauty, to dying trees covered in scaffolding, a map of crushed stuff at their feet. The longer I stay and look, the more the distant box opens, and I can warble or crawl toward it instead of just trying to sit in this chair. I don't know how to be here either, but the longer I make the path, the more lookouts appear. There's a skull with light in it, a holy shovel until I'm nailed again to the sky in my head, and we stand here together like clouds. So as David mentioned, there's a series of poems in this book about my childhood. Well, it's a childhood in Indiana, sort of loosely based on my childhood, and the series is called Indiana Problem, so this is one of those poems. Indiana Problem, Toad Circus. The day after my toad circus, the toads were all dead, crunchy and silent in their window well. I wanted to draw a doorway to walk through to get to the world of lilacs. Purple, contagious green leaves and no movement but the steady, invisible breathing of flowers. I knew I had to tell someone what I had done, so I first walked to the park and stayed there until dusk, sitting on the glider or in the middle of the rusty and dangerous merry-go-round. I can't remember which. When it was nearly dark, I walked home, certain that they were worried and maybe even out looking for me. When I got there, I saw them busy in the kitchen through the window, so I hid in the backyard until it was good and dark, a living thing on a swing set in the gloom, the attic in my head cracking open for the first time, and I went in. A lot of the other poems in the book are about a year I spent living in England with my husband. So there's a lot of like sheep and English countryside kind of stuff because we lived in Dorset. Yeah, this one is called Monstrous. My face, talking signpost or locked door to a ballroom in a derelict hotel. I walk alone through the woods to the house of another dead Englishman. Their families and clots of children exclaiming over a live cat in a bedroom. Then silent but shoulder to shoulder, they read about 18th century hair. For all to see, I clonk my head in a tiny doorway, exclaim in American while everyone looks away. Before there were humans, there was darkness. Dark swaying, a mist, a lake of blood, but everything was a lake of blood. And born of the blood were even creatures like me, who make mothers run from every direction, who sleep as open-hearted as the newly dead. And I'm really into horror movies. And that's all I'll say about this. This is about a horror movie called The Ring, which is one of my favorite movies. The Well. I couldn't sleep and stayed up most of the night on oxycodone, watching horror movies and placing my body into the weird contortion that turned the pain from a nail gun into a moderately smoking campfire. Then it was morning and I had to go down to the basement, but I was too scared. The last time I tried, I fell down the rotting steps and landed with my cheek in a puddle, a displaced bug scurrying by my eyelash. I had stopped going to work and lived in a voice structure. Instead of walls and floors and my third floor view of roofs, every step seemed to place me on paths of braided invisible limbs as I went from bed to bathroom to hunch over the stove. I heard voices in these creatures, and before long it was easier to stay in bed, folded into my V shape. For most of my life I couldn't watch horror movies because I believed in real demonic possession. But now I don't mind the stupidity of horror movie people, their underwater movement, their staring and staring into indifferent caverns of nothingness. In one movie, the angry dead girl wanted the people to learn a lesson, but what they needed to learn was the worst kind of exhaustion, and they wouldn't learn it. They finally found the well under the floor, but finding it only made things worse. One ended with no eyes, while another was cursed to live this life over and over again. And this one is for my friend Heather Hughes, who's here tonight, and it's about Phil Collins, and I believe that she attended a Genesis concert the other night, which is, I'm so jealous. I love Phil Collins. And this poem may make it seem like I don't like him, but I do like him a lot. Today's Alchemy. On the top of the Pops from 1980, Phil Collins in his Hawaiian shirt dances awkwardly, lip-syncing, his bald spot flashing pink and blue. The couch I just bought is already wearing out, and the dust covers everything, even the sky and distant tangle of trees. Out the window I watch a new lamb unfold onto bent legs. I feel a pulley in my chest whenever I look at her movement, crumpled and blind, automatic. Her pupils are rectangular like the pupils of all prey. I could hunt her if I wanted to, but my natural instinct is a long Formica counter with a row of harmless ladies stopping their feelings, collapsing and stuck in their own black holes. Phil Collins, my flamingo in flight, my loop dancer of mediocrity, all I have is the external. Boys and girls on the greatest day of their lives dance and push each other to the stage as the camera swings up to blue lights before collapsing skin and young joy into me, their silent mannequin. Oh, here's another Indiana. I have a lot of poems in this book about different 80s toys that I played with, so this features a few of those toys. Indiana Problem, Mousetrap. Wrapped in an Afghan and playing Mousetrap, I worried that I wasn't giving enough attention to the stupider toys. Light bright with most of the pieces missing, life-size Barbie head smeared with red and blue, forever bruised and smiling, shoebox and rubber animals. Boredom was always a dim garden in the background, a place where twilight was described by adults. Ears stretched toward the opening notes of sitcoms, eyes stretched toward the windows and the sketchy trees. Dark Hoosier sadness, the houses so close, I could hear their forks and knives. I left the door open. I didn't plan this second kingdom, not exactly in the mind or the heart, but in the dullness between them. Awaiting so long, they made another body in case this one got too lonely. Right now, just read a couple more. This one is about, there's a place in Salem, New Hampshire called America's Stonehenge. That's, it's a, like, very small monoliths, I guess, I'm not sure what you would call them. And they're not, no one's really sure where, if they're, you know, where, the patterns are created by indigenous people or, you know, Europeans who traveled here centuries ago. But it's a really cool place if you haven't been before, and it's a very short drive, so I recommend it. This is about a time I went there in the 90s with a boyfriend I had who was a jerk. Something else, I think my parents are watching this. America's Stonehenge. Hungover, we crept around the stone mazes and huts. While I tried to feel something, if not the hearts of ancient European mystics, then that the past, our past, could be different through sheer will. There was a grayness under the trees, though the sun shone somewhere outside them. And my mean, tall boyfriend stumbled over the stone path, tiny as a road made for dolls, then lurched with his to-go cup and illegally gripped one of the walls of the caves that were too small to enter. Even if we could have stood in them, there were tall hedgerows in us with cars scurrying to prevent that, or dull afternoons in other cars trying for hours to figure out where to go before giving up, or unseen animals underlining the silence, or pacing, or just sitting before wandering into their pits of sleep. What I see as the main idea of the real Stonehenge is that there is no cleansing or hiding or giving up, no levels to ascend, no boat to take us somewhere. A night with stars waiting is not beyond our grasp. There are no answers beyond this stupid wandering. There are some tall rocks. And the last poem, oh wait. Very too long. This one's short. Sublime. Yes, that example of death and destruction is exactly what I'm talking about. That sounds truly sublime. There must be a hint of death in it, but over and over, no one wants to talk about death, and what do I know about it anyway? I paced the room with a biscotti, remembering death, my own pain and suffering, too scared to go to the beach alone. The pain, like everything I love, thrown into the trees, misunderstood. I've changed my stance. You should probably keep your children away from me. Lying on the deck for a quick nap, I come to in a restaurant, seated at a reasonable distance from those who have not forgotten to not be alone. I'm about to hit all of the hard parts of my body on some unforgiving street, but instead I land on another body and another, all of the bodies surrounding me, not piled up, but stacked neatly, facing me, waiting for me. All right, this is the last one. Abuse. It was dark and I tripped on the dog stairs on the way to the bathroom. The dog needs stairs to get on the bed because her legs are so short. I was in the basement and saw the rain hit the grass in the dark through the window, lit up by headlights. I was at worm level. As a woman, I'm closer to being an animal than a man is. The dog moved over in the bed so I could get back in. Closer to animals, I am more prone to Satan. I am more easily seduced by the things that cast shadows. It's how you know I'm not dead. A long time ago, and maybe even now, the gods did horrible things because they could. But even in the journey through purgatory, there is day and night, friendly dead orators, mountainside rest, brooks, insane skies, green angels, fields of gentle monsters, and their stories. And within the owl is the process to make its pellet, the capsule of stuff it doesn't need, a little package of bones and fur that must be of some use to something. In the morning I was still underground, but could leave if I wanted, could walk the sidewalks where most people seemed to be pregnant. The guy still had my coffee. I could stand for a long time and watch a horse in a field above ground. There was ground in the place I asked for, and in its way, it needed me.
Yeah, go for it.
All right. Thank you, Julius. My favorite poems. All right. Now on to my friend Mark Vincenz. Mark Vincenz has published 16 books of poetry, and his most recent two are A Brief Conversation with Consciousness, brand new from Unlikely Books, and The Little Book of Earthly Delights from Spite and Devil Books, which Mark told me means spitting devil. Here's part of how I introduced that book. All of the poetry of Mark Vincenz is a love affair with the international experience of language and poetry. His American side, his British side, his musician side, his Hong Kong childhood, picking up fluid Cantonese by ear and unsupervised delinquency, his 10 years running an international design company in Shanghai, his Swiss Alpine sense of wine and mountains past Springfield, the Arthur Waley translations of the Tang Dynasty poets, and Bly's Transtromer and the Polish poets he read in translation following his time at Duke, the unadorned sparseness of George Oppen, the aspect that is rare but cherished in American poets that is as unafraid of admitting a goofy moment of happiness as it is of admitting a nightmare, an anti-crafty workshop adjective of insubstantial feeling or two in favor of being human and admitting it, a beautiful and seemingly aimless line that consists of the one word something with a smile up its sleeve that tells Ezra Pound to go kiss his Jaffoa, his time with African Anglophone poets in Kenya and South Africa, the British elevation of diction and the occasional swoops towards a comic rhyme or a movingly taciturn withholding of flashiness. It's all here in the convergences of his poetry of suggestion and statement. I leave it to you to find the extent of his transformations.
Was that just an excerpt of Howl that you read?
No, that was your
Intro.
So I'm going to start today with a poem from my new book that came out in about mid-year, The Little Book of Earthly Delights, out from Spike and Dival. If any of you take a chance to read it, it's much based on Chinese tongue poetry, but kind of addressing contemporary subjects. And this is called The Great Pause, which is of course what happened to us last year. The bright lights in the window offer the plainest of views. It's as if the great finger of time has depressed the button, even the earth rattles less. Across the land, streets are empty, highways barren, all the plain and beautiful truths revealed. How do you feel? Asks my neighbor on the phone. My dog stares at me with vigor he once had, an endless passing and throwing of rubber toys. I cannot speak for you, I tell my neighbor. It's a perfect time to shop at Walmart, he tells me. A new pair of Nikes his son wanted alone on the shelf. Meanwhile, everything has been laid bare by a single pangolin. Can that be? I ask myself. Woo-hoo, says my dog. And a book that came out earlier this year, Einstein Fledermaus, from Survision Books in Ireland. A single poem from that book, Amorous Songs to the Universe. Absence and presence is written in the Tao Te Ching, is like foresight and hindsight. What lies in between but dark matter? Another way of looking at it is this. Who resides in the mirror but you? All the bureaucrats are sipping ouzo in the Café Royal after midnight. It seems the Greeks knew a thing or two. Lemon and garlic are the perfect pairing to bring out the flavor of any meat or bean, the perfect foot-stomping song. And at that critical moment, after a Davidoff more or two, something became clear. An epiphany, a liturgy. The question wasn't whose home to awaken in. Given all this time meditating on the question, you had to know where the answer was coming from. God singing into the cosmos. It was at the Kaiserbar on the Hauptallee behind the Rathaus, where crows gathered in the dawn to fight over remnants of a mouse, where during the day the children dragged their tubas, their bassoons, their xylophone mallets, and their flugelhorns to practice "The good Lord is within us." And what am I given to understand? He was. The cosmos itself, or themselves, is continuously tumbling through its transformations. I should know this better than most. And now some poems from my newest book, A Brief Conversation with Consciousness, which came out with Unlikely Books in New Orleans. Just came out. This is called Reading Signals, Writing Surplus. My 4 uncles and 3 aunts have all made it through the Panama Canal. Their childhood was upside down too, and then there's the wider effect. Their adventures have led them through pastel colors, contorting mirrors, exotic locales like the dusty wayward minaret or the lumbering Berth Teesside just south of Newcastle upon Tyne. But on my coffee table there's an old scrapbook replete with dinars, zlotys, and the 100 million billion pengo. Anything that's served at the reliquary is well in hand, from the uniform button on the lapel of the shape of a wild boar to the Charles Félicien Tissot pocket watch that served in World War I. You've saved the good furniture for this mother's lattice headdress and the best bread in the district. The rivalry is appalling. Who cares if Fuerteventura is in Spain or in Portugal, or if one of our ancestors stuck up a stagecoach? Who cares if you're a milk magnate or a jam baroness, or if that rifle bullet lodged in your head has still not killed you? Everything was inspired by a delegation of Oriental emissaries. But there's still something else. Having taken every liberty in the world, the leopard skin tacked to the barn door is just too much. Murmurs. More than a year now, the strange crews work 2 by 2 as the airplanes drone overhead. 10 plagues of Egypt have descended, but even now, to talk of them is strangely taboo. Alligators raise their eyes to the surface, and the dome of the sky is the color of pumice. Factory stacks are still puffing away, all in the name of hard science. The scene opens like a newspaper, the landscape scarred in infinite cracks. And just at this moment, a traveler stands in the doorway. You can tell he has committed a crime. His wry grin betrays any last chance to meet the eyes. "Go on," he cries, goading the crews of 2 by 2 to the prerogative of all. "Sound words," he says. "Solid advice." His ankle boots are sharkskin. His perfumed hat ripe in a peacock plume. His sheen drenches the air. "We knew it would come to this," he says, pulling 3 brand new bills from his deerskin wallet. "One of the most beautiful sports spots in northern Orphadelia." He laughs. "We'll be finished in a week or 2, and they'll all descend from the hills and flood into here like a plague of rodents. Be ready," he says. "They'll all try to fleece you." I nod quietly, staring at the unfinished reinforced concrete. A mouse crosses the street. A vulture circles. Cliffhanger. All hail the monster on this Hallows Eve. Watch the pandonium unfurl, the damsel in distress as the dull dawn rumbles. A shadow stands watch over your grave. Don't recoil from the long years of time. Wait until day mushrooms into itself. No, the way melds every living shadow, fills itself within us until we find our material self in unison. At the top of the belfry, with the first rush of wings within the roots of the sun, let the voices boil up. First simmer on a low heat, gas is best. That assured flame in purple robes. Don't sob, we're perennials, monster, and we know how to glow in the dark. Where do you lay your eggs? Do you leap from branch to branch, or crawl like the ivy? All the lashes to your frame, a ladder among the clover. Be your full material self, press your face to mine. Let me be a swallow to your hawk. You've named a tree for me? Cross the meadow and turn away from the stairs. Are you still lying in waiting? Don't fear the crowds in the street. Return to your roots, your humble abode where hinges are rusty and voices barely audible. Recently, no wind arrived with your premonition looking for me. Scouting you out in the darkness, me? I still sink, but you, from the moment of your creation, encased in a shaft of light, not holy or risen, but brimming, ever flowing, a gift I dreamed in the high branches. And this one. The documents required. The documents required, they might as well be, since I've no guarantee, which is to say they become foam or froth, billows of linens, ruffled dust cloth, and with a particular kind of perfume evidence, but not tipped for success. They might as well be with immobile kneecaps, sand in their eyes, the full-step tango required again. Why a yarn rather than the ordinary? Strings like root systems deep beneath where white maggots thread their burrows. It's also much a question of defining it. Why no? The very idea discloses the pantomime. Quite capable, it's said. They might as well be unanimously needed, persuasive, yet difficult to deal with. For no particular reason, no defining season, just gentle persuasion out of deference, or so much discouragement, or something like spectators flourishing. They might as well be little planets in the habitable zone, faithful witnesses of a time when the sun herself was a chicken's paradise. The last one, the title poem of the book, A Brief Conversation with Consciousness. And how the origin, down in the break where we dream and move forward, is not about the departed or the famines. The epic goes on to talk of great gods and their pestilences. Here, the problem bursts open. The epicenter begins what occurred in the illumination. Bread, hard bread, pulped into reconstitution. Impassivity found a mind of its own. The mentality that arises from too much smoke. The hashish person cannot therefore be trusted to fulfill their lot. That breaking up of swallows, the civilization of things backing into prosperity, preposterously. Scandalous that we indeed are owned by different gods, all wholly created, all exaggerated in that unit of social control and evictive evolution, a way the police state with more subscribers than citizens, one fist over another, wary of its reign, moves northward toward the open seas where crossings are fed with former inscriptions, where the collapse is redacted and the people staring at the end of a voice, at the end of a vote, a probable creature of vice, then head southwind, embark land upon legend where intellect is subject to subjective consciousness, where in the model of religion, a crisis is all that is needed, where the gods earning their functions and their proportions simply vanished into distraction, then an upsurge where man alone faces that modicum, where theocracy induces a change of mind, a retaliation of conscriptions, a nascent symbol, a street to be walked beside, a head to be seen, a feudal fetal position cherished, discussed over reputable wines, over the forsaken fallen, over the founding fathers, over this sparkling new city, over the Rome in a day, the hierarchy, the weary and disturbed, the logic such that the idea of evil is where gods live, where that other face, that sometimes senseless passage, is another's. It is said, if a horse enters a home, then that household will be scattered. It is known. Here lies an empty window.
This introduction will be very short. Whose work I'm looking forward to getting to know more about. Elizabeth T. Gray Jr., born in Boston, Massachusetts, is the author of the poetry collection series India. Her celebrated translations, wait a minute, when do I got this on? From classical and contemporary Persian include Wine and Prayer, 80 Ghazals from Divan of Hafiz, The Green Sea of Heaven, 50 Ghazals from the Divan of Hafiz, and Iran, Poems of Descent. She's also an expert in complex negotiation and the formation and management of strategic alliances and other forms of inter-organizational collaboration, unless I look at the website of a different person named Elizabeth T. Gray.
Thank you all. It is amazing for me to be back here. I first walked into this store. You need to adjust that. first walked into the store in 1967, and it changed my life. I lived in Cambridge until 1990, and it was amazing to be here. I'm going to read tonight from the book you didn't mention.
Oh,
That's okay. I think it was on the website. Is this a microphone?
Microphone's to your right.
Okay, so I can put something over this.
Yeah, go for it.
Salient, this is a long poem that was published last spring by New Directions. And it draws on two sources for its material. One is field manuals issued by the British War Office during World War I, and medieval texts of protective magic. Like, are you kidding me? In high school, I came across and became absolutely riveted by the battles of late 1917 in Belgian Flanders. These are in fact the battles of in Flanders field. I was mesmerized by the guns, the ground, the mud, and the missing. 90,000 British soldiers deployed into the salient around the city of Ypres, the medieval city of Ypres, and vanished. They were vaporized by shell fire, they fell into muddy shell holes and simply vanished. So I spent the ensuing decades collecting materials and accounts and trench maps of the time. Also at the time, I became mesmerized by Tibetan texts of protective magic. Texts that taught you how to avoid death. Texts that taught you how to look at a landscape and find out where the danger was. So to generate the poem, I placed those two sets of documents next to each other. So it's part fusion, part collage, and this strange hybrid emerged in the force field between them, in which I initially thought I might find the missing. Not so. Over the past decade, I've spent a lot of time in Belgian Flanders, 3 or 4 weeks, spring and fall, walking the battlefields. And the first time I went, it looked nothing like 1917, right? You remember the black and white pictures of battlefields covered with mud and trench holes. It's all beautiful EU subsidized cows and meadows. And all the buildings that were reduced to rubble by 1918 have all been rebuilt exactly as they were. So it's very disturbing. So the first poem I'm going to read captures some of that. It's geographically centered at a place called Crest Farm, which wasn't actually a farm. It was a place on the Passchendaele Ridge. And it took the Canadian divisions 3 weeks and 16,000 casualties to take this tiny piece of land. Looking for the war. Crest Farm was never called that on German maps. It was not actually a farm. It was captured at great cost by the 72nd Battalion, 4th Canadian Division. Those were the Seaforth Highlanders from Vancouver on 30th October 1917. It was the jumping off line for the 27th Battalion, 2nd Canadian Division from the city of Winnipeg at 0600 on 6th November, but is not here. There are no signs of it or what happened. Just a small car park, pub, this circle of maples, a bakery, this line of tiny houses down the road. So it was about getting my bearings on this weird landscape, and I spent a lot of time with British maps. In some ways, the situation is analogous to that facing Second Army in 1915. The trig and mapping situation is complex. Here I am, straddling the Franco-Belgian frontier, and several sets of trigonometric data of varying antiquity exist for the region. The trigonometric problem is that although others have begun to use the Belgian spheroid origin, azimuth, and sheet lines as the basis for their own survey, referring the French data to these, the absence of central geodetic control in some GHQ leaves each of us to our own devices. My situation is difficult. I have to reconcile the trig and leveling data of the various systems available for this area, including the French Admiralty triangulation and British cross-channel work, with my own emotions, complex mathematical calculations, and a feeling of loss. Where are the missing? A Tibetan text might have the answer. Recalling the blah. The blah, or soul, can also leave the body as a result of a frightening event or unbearable pain. In such cases, it may be recalled or ordered back by means of a ritual. The blah may dwell temporarily, at least, in various places outside the body without risk of any danger. Hence the expression blana, dwelling of the soul, a place where the blah takes up residence. It can be a rock or tree, a pond, a small canal, or a piece of church. Tibetan deities take many forms. A single Tibetan deity can manifest in a variety of tantric forms. And behind the cortex I was working with is a 12th century Tibetan female saint named Machik Labdrung. And every now and then it seemed like they sort of showed up on the battlefields. The missing. It was a test. She asked, are they here or not? Because the land is flat, it's hard to see. The men may be hidden in that empty space. The canal was a serious obstacle. The banks of the dikes are bordered with willows, the lyric moment at its best. At the edge of each moment, I thought I saw movement. It was a test. She asked, are they here or not? The lines kept changing, but not by much. Because the land was flat, it was hard to see. The men may be hidden in that empty space. The banks of the dikes are bordered with willows. You can read this, she said. The lines ran right through this cornfield. Corroded buttons, cap badges, numbered discs. At the edge of each moment, I thought I saw movement. When the sun came out, I was surprised. I asked, should I just go home? The canal was a serious obstacle, the lyric moment at its best. The lines kept changing, but not by much. It was a test. She asked, are they here or not? Gently, metal on metal, something on its own terms. When the sun came out, I was surprised. The lines ran right through this cornfield. The banks of the dikes are bordered with willows. The canal was a serious obstacle. You can read this, she said. The next poem is an amazing description of a battle that took place in the middle of September 1917 along something called the Menin Road. If you saw the movie in 1917, I assure you that was a very pretty, unrealistic version of the battlefield. This is a description, when I first read this, I thought, oh my God, this is a precise description of what the battlefield looked like in mid-September. The text is completely drawn from Machik Labdrung's teaching on how to recognize the signs of specific spirits and demons when they arise. So all of this is verbatim from the Tibetan texts. You are in the midst of much filth, or going along a road, or digging up earth, or escorting. or loading or unloading goods. Many people try to harm you, or you are trying to help them. The sky fills with fire, or lights of many different colors fall from the sky like a rain of arrows. Your tongue is so dry you can't speak, or you feel uneasy. You become senseless in a thick darkness. Your limbs are stuck, outstretched, or flexed, or your skin hardens and contracts. Your body becomes numb and prickly, or it boils and burns like a bonfire, or it feels intense nausea like ants running out. There are human corpses burned or stacked up. Many pack animals are loaded up and led around. New and old things cover the whole place. There are many horse corpses burned or spread around or flayed and chopped up. Small animals are eating them. The whole ground consists of human and horse skin, or it is filled with many fresh and stale heads. These are the outer signs. One of the documents that was quite moving was a diary kept by a Canadian medical officer. And there's a few lines from it that explain exactly how the missing got to be missing. It's called The Guts of It. I think I would prefer to be killed in a railway accident, he said. Why? Because there you are. But if you're killed by an exploding shell, he went on, then where the hell are you? At home, wives and girlfriends waited and had no idea communications back and forth were non-existent. And if the wind was just right, from London, you could hear the artillery from Flanders. So this is a pair of poems. There's a thread that runs through the poem about a lover and beloved, a woman and her soldier. It's hard to pick pieces of this poem to read, so the thread line I am reading tonight does not focus on that particular thread. Night, shell hole. The southwestern edge of Decoy Wood, 12 October 1917. The location on the trench map sheet is 28 Northeast 1, Sonnevik, D18, A21. Because I am terrified, I reach out in the darkness and touch another man's body. He is solid and protection, and unaware of me lying beneath him. His remains are very still in this house. It's cold, and the water seems to rise very slowly. He is both a man and a caution, here for a reason. I will wait for daylight to see where we are. The way his arm is folded, rigid with cold, offers a loophole, a way to see undetected. And this may open out into some kind of actionable intelligence that might be kept carried back and in some small way matter. I have been warned several times of this, the risks, what might happen if I raise my head. Night, bedroom, London. 2 days later. Because you're missing, I reach out in the darkness and touch another man's body. He is solid and protection, and unaware of me weeping beneath him. He remains very still in this house. It's cold. He is both a man and a desperation, here for a reason. Perhaps in daylight someone will see where you are. His folded limbs act as a blind, a way not to see. And this evasion opens out into some kind of imagined evidence that things might remain as they were, and in some small way matter. I was warned several times about this, the risks, what might happen if you raised your head. The missing. Some became smoke, cloud, and rain. As when a pot breaks, the space within and the space without become intermingled, the body reduced to its atomic constituents, indistinguishable from the awareness within. Others dissolved into light from their feet upwards. The heavy shelling at D6, D45, west of what remained of the church, for example. And after the light faded from the sky, there were no bodies. So it is said that instead of wooden crosses, they have names planted in space. Our bodies. Our bodies grew younger, pliant, light, like the 10 winds or cotton wool, changeless and radiantly luminous. Let me back up a sec. I initially sort of thought this poem, Our Bodies, was about the beloved and lover. A very astute critic read it as if it is the soldiers talking about one another. So I try and hold both of those in mind. Our bodies. Our bodies grew younger, pliant, light, like the 10 winds or cotton wool, changeless and radiantly luminous. We will be separated for just a moment. When I looked over my shoulder, a dense mist where there had been coral and turquoise. Your words were lies to me, but not to you. A promise incompletely informed, as we are when we make a vow, in earnest or the moment, all alloy of desire and blindness, suspended, all wish embedded in the apotropaic, the way a figure waits in clay, cooling slowly, assuming he will be released back to daylight, intact, by clearing parties or skilled craftsmen. My body may have felt like a lie to you, but not to me, although there were lights in the dark air, falling slowly, illuminating the ground of the room, where everything had stopped. When I looked over my shoulder, a dense mist separated for just a moment, and there were our bodies, changeless and radiantly luminous. Your words begin to sound younger, pliant, light, like the 10 winds moving into the present. When I look over your shoulder, I see the ground as an alloy of fire and blindness, that we are separated for just a moment, and a dense mist in which we are once again, coral and turquoise. So, as a last poem, given the season, as you may recall, or not, in December of 1914, the first Christmas of the war, at various places along the front in France and Belgium, there was a tacit truce, negotiated tacitly by the soldiers in the trenches. They called out to each other, they sang carols on the morning of Christmas, they came out and played soccer and exchanged gifts, and the generals paid to that pretty fast, and the shelling continued again. It never recurred. That one time in December 1914, the goddess came to the place of hell, and just by seeing her, the hell laborers delayed their torture work, and sentient beings on both sides, all of us, were instantly freed from anger and the results of anger, such as the sufferings of rain and cold, hailstorms and broken sandbags, and being pulled apart and choked. The burning ground became lapis lazuli, and the hungry ghosts were sated. The animals no longer suffered. The demigods were no longer jealous of one another, and the gods shredded all their maps. All needs and desires fell away like rain, and the suffering of all sentient beings stopped, went silent, and across the frozen ground between us, you could hear the carols. It's amazing to be back. Thank you.
I think we have time for a few questions if anyone would like to ask the poets any questions.
Oh, sorry.
Okay. Otherwise, let's give the poets one more round of applause. We have some books for sale. The poets will be signing some books. Thank you so much, everybody, for attending. Our next reading and last one of the year is on December 30th with Richard Fine and George Caligiris. We hope you'll all be there.
George.
Yeah. Thanks.
Thanks, Dave.
Thanks, Jim. Thanks for having us all.
Thank you so much.
Oh,
There's a-
this might be.
Yes.
It was a beautiful reading.
Actually, this should not be true.
Well,
Right, let's just put it right here. We're all the connections.
why don't we let rest around?
Yeah,
Yeah, right.
it is here, right. I figured, what is wrong?
So how long did it take you that book to
Depends on the count. I mean, I read it since documents on both.
I have no idea. How are you?
Yeah, I'm going to
Yeah, her book? Great. Did she buy it? Yeah. I don't recall that. Yeah, I'll get you those.
Oh, yeah, there you go. Oh my God, this is your town.
Yeah, it's my husband's
Bigger than the Bible. Oh, it's pre-signed, all right. Oh, there.
In Belgium, you didn't see the Iowa.
I beelined it to the cafe before everybody
These guys, they speak terrible English. You know, they're all business people. They live out there growing sugar beets.
Or you get these
Why haven't I heard of this? Because it's in the middle of Iowa.
This mark with a K. Two by mark with a C, one by mark with a K.
So it's great to did not expect to hear.
I didn't turn it off.
Yeah, really
Well, non-standard.
Mind your way?
Yeah.
Okay. Happy holidays, happy New Year. I'm not going to make it the next one, so great to see you.
Oh, sorry.
Do you mind if I grab that?
You are. Thanks.